The spotlight glowed like a miniature sun at the heart of the city's annual Dream Stage talent show. Beneath its radiance stood a small girl, no taller than the microphone she clutched with both trembling hands. Her name was Lena Moore, and tonight she was about to change more lives than she could ever imagine. In the front row sat Nathan Cross, a sharply dressed man whose life was ruled by numbers, deadlines, and the ticking of an expensive watch. He wasn't here for pleasure. His company had sponsored the event, and his assistant had insisted that his appearance was good optics. To him, it was a formality, a box to tick before returning to the empire he had built from the dust of his ambition. Nathan leaned back in his chair, scrolling through emails while the crowd hushed. Around him, hundreds of spectators waited eagerly for the next performer, their anticipation creating a low hum in the grand theater. Red velvet curtains framed the stage, their folds heavy with the history of 1,000 forgotten dreams. Then, a small voice pierced the silence. "Good evening, everyone," Lena said, steadying her voice though her fingers shook. "This song is for the most important person in my world, my sick mom." The audience let out a collective sigh of tenderness. Nathan barely lifted his gaze from his phone until the first note filled the air. The moment Lena began to sing, something inside him snapped. His phone slipped from his hand, clattering loudly against the marble floor her song was haunting. Eternal hearts that beat as one beneath the same bright shining sun. Only 3 people on earth knew those lyrics. 8 years earlier, Nathan had written that song with the woman he once believed he would marry. She had vanished without warning, leaving behind nothing but a letter that shattered him into silence. Hearing it again, sung by this little girl with a voice almost identical to hers, was like hearing a ghost. The child's delicate features, the tilt of her head on every high note, even the soft blue of her eyes. It was all too familiar. It was impossible, and yet undeniable. Backstage, behind those heavy curtains, Eva Moore watched her daughter sing with pride and fear, interwoven in every breath. She had no idea that the man sitting just 50 feet away, the one she had once loved with her entire soul, was watching the same performance. Tears gathering in his eyes as realization dawned. 3 broken hearts, bound by the same secret melody, were about to collide again in a way that would rewrite everything. The theater's warmth wrapped around Lena as she sang, but behind the spotlight, her mother was trembling from exhaustion. Eva's hands were thin, worn by months of medical treatments and part-time jobs that barely kept the lights on. The once golden hair that Nathan had once compared to sunlight now hung dull and brittle around her face. Still, her eyes shone with fierce love. The little white dress her daughter wore had cost only a few dollars from a thrift store, but Eva had spent hours repairing it, pressing out wrinkles, sewing small pearl buttons, and adding a ribbon at the waist so it looked almost new. Lena took a deep breath before her verse. Every sound from her lips was pure light and sorrow intertwined. Nathan's body went rigid as he recognized not just the song, but something deeper. Her mannerisms, her voice, her very soul mirrored the woman he had lost. Every lyric sliced through the years of distance like a blade. 8 years ago, Nathan Cross was a different man. Back then, his name carried no weight. His suits came from clearance racks, and his dreams were larger than his resources. He was 25, surviving on caffeine and faith, building a small tech company in a cramped apartment that doubled as his home. And it was there, amid tangled wires and empty takeout boxes, that he met Eva, a musician who played at a quiet bar on the east side of town. He had gone there one night to drown out the noise of failure, but what he found instead was a melody that changed him forever. Eva's voice that night had silenced every conversation in that smoky room. She sang from the soul, each note shimmering with a kind of truth no studio microphone could ever capture. When she finished, Nathan found himself standing near the stage, words failing him as he tried to speak. "That was beautiful," he had said awkwardly. "Could I buy you a coffee sometime?" Eva had laughed, a sound that melted his composure. "It's almost midnight," she'd teased. "You mean breakfast coffee?" "Tomorrow morning," he replied. "Somewhere quiet, somewhere your music belongs." And from that morning onward, they had been inseparable for months. They built 2 dreams side by side, his company and her music, Their nights were spent surrounded by guitar chords and scribbled notes. They created eternal hearts together, sitting cross-legged on the floor of his apartment, crafting the words between laughter, kisses, and hope. It became their promise, their private song of forever. Now that same song, born of love and dreams, was being sung by a little girl who looked like both of them. Nathan's breath came shallow. The realization hit him all at once. If Lena was 7 years old, then Eva must have been pregnant when she disappeared. The stage lights glowed brighter as the final chorus swelled. Lena's voice reached its peak, every note trembling with emotion, pure and unfiltered. The audience was utterly silent, held captive by something divine, and as her final note faded, Nathan stood, clapping uncontrollably, tears streaking down his face for the first time in years. The applause roared like thunder through the theater, echoing off the high ceilings and velvet walls. For almost 3 full minutes, the audience stood and clapped, unable to contain what they had just witnessed. In that sea of admiration, Nathan Cross remained motionless for a moment, tears glistening in his eyes, heart racing as his mind screamed one impossible thought: "She's mine." When the noise finally softened, Lena smiled and curtsied with childlike grace. "Thank you, everyone," she said breathlessly into the microphone. Then, turning toward the shadowed side of the stage, she called, "I love you, Mom," and blew a kiss. Behind the curtains, Eva barely managed to stay upright. Her knees trembled as emotion and exhaustion collided. That little girl was her miracle, her purpose, the reason she had survived when everything else in her life had fallen apart. The head judge, his voice thick with emotion, spoke into his mic. "That was extraordinary, young lady. You've set a standard that will be hard to match." Lena beamed. She didn't fully understand what her song had done to that room, or to one man in particular sitting near the front. Nathan barely heard the rest of the event. Performers came and went, but he couldn't focus. Every note, every light, every sound blurred together as he stared at the stage curtain where Eva had disappeared moments ago. His mind was a storm of disbelief, guilt, and aching hope. After the final act, he walked out of the theater, hands shaking. The cool night air hit his face, grounding him for a moment in reality. He pulled out his phone and opened a secure contact list reserved for private investigations and business emergencies. "I need a full background check," he said quietly when his security chief answered. "Name Eva Moore. Current residence, employment, medical status, everything discreetly." Within hours, his resources had done what ordinary people couldn't. By morning, Nathan sat in his glass-walled office, staring at a digital report glowing on his laptop. Line after line revealed details that turned his chest hollow. Eva had been living in Dallas again for 6 months, working multiple part-time jobs, waitressing, cleaning, and cashiering, to stay afloat. Her medical records indicated early-stage cancer, treated through a public hospital's oncology program. Notes about financial hardship and limited insurance coverage appeared more than once. Nathan's throat tightened as he read the words "single mother" and "no known family support." Then he saw it. Lena Moore, date of birth, 9 months after Eva's disappearance. Father unknown. He didn't need a DNA test to know the truth. His mind replayed the math automatically. Every date, every detail aligning perfectly. Lena was his daughter. The little girl who sang his song was the family he never knew existed. 2 days later, Nathan walked through the sterile corridors of the city's public hospital, the hum of fluorescent lights echoing above him. His tailored suit and polished shoes looked painfully out of place among the worn chairs and faded floors. People turned their heads as he passed, whispering. It wasn't every day that one of the city's most recognizable businessmen walked through these halls without cameras or press. He didn't care about appearances now. He just wanted to see her. Through a narrow glass window, he saw Eva emerge from a doctor's office, holding a folder of test results close to her chest. She looked thinner, paler than he remembered. Her hair was shorter, her movements slow and careful, as though even standing required effort. When their eyes met, time stopped. The folder slipped from her hands. Paper scattered across the floor in a white flurry. Her lips parted, trembling as if to form a name she had sworn never to say again. Nathan bent down immediately, gathering the documents. The words he saw printed on them, chemotherapy schedules, dosage charts, financial forms, stabbed through him like knives. When he stood, his voice was rough, almost breaking. Eva, is Lena. Her eyes flared with something between fear and fury. You have no right to ask that. You have no right to be here. Please, Nathan said softly, desperation raw in his tone. Just 5 minutes, that's all I need. To understand what happened, why you left, why you never told me. Eva hesitated, glancing around the crowded hallway. A few nurses were already whispering, recognizing Nathan from television interviews and business magazines. The last thing she wanted was attention. 5 minutes, she said coldly. Then you walk away and leave us alone. They found a small hospital cafeteria, empty except for a few tired workers hunched over coffee cups. The plastic chairs creaked under their weight as they sat across from each other for the first time in 8 years. The silence stretched long enough for both of them to feel its weight. You look tired, Nathan said finally, his voice low. You've been through hell, Eva's lips tightened. We've managed. She's beautiful, he said softly. She has your eyes, but she has my chin, and my grandmother's little freckle by the ear. Eva's hands clenched around her coffee cup. She's everything to me, and she's been fine without you. Nathan's throat burned. Why, Eva? Why did you disappear? What did I do? Her composure wavered, a flicker of pain flashing through her eyes. Don't pretend you don't know. Don't act like you forgot what I saw. What you saw, he repeated, confused. Pictures, Nathan, emails, recordings. Proof that you were using me while you were sleeping with investors and lying about it. A woman named Rebecca came to me 8 years ago and showed me who you really were. He stared at her, stunned. Rebecca Holt, my investor, she said she had evidence. That you laughed about how naive I was. That you were just, Eva's voice broke, playing me. Nathan's pulse thundered in his ears. His logical mind was already dismantling the story piece by piece. Show me. Whatever she gave you, show me. I threw it all away, she said bitterly, years ago. I couldn't look at it anymore. Nathan leaned forward, his eyes fierce with sudden clarity. Eva, listen to me. You were lied to. All of it. The photos, the audio, the files. Someone went to great lengths to make you believe that. Her expression faltered. For the first time, doubt flickered through her guarded composure. I'm going to prove it, he said. But first, please, tell me the truth. Is Lena my daughter? Her breath hitched. She looked into the eyes of the man she had once loved, the man she had cursed and mourned in equal measure. The dam finally broke. Yes, she whispered. She's yours. Nathan closed his eyes as the weight of 7 lost years collapsed over him like an avalanche. All the missed birthdays, the laughter he'd never heard, the hugs he'd never felt, gone. He pressed his trembling hands to his face, trying to breathe through the pain. When he spoke again, his voice cracked. Why didn't you tell me? Why didn't you give me the chance to know her? Eva's tears fell silently. Because I believed what I saw. Because I thought you had already replaced us before we even began. Nathan reached across the table, gently taking her hand. I swear to you, I never betrayed you, not once. I loved you then, and I love you now. Everything you saw was a lie. Eva looked away, the wall she'd built for years beginning to crumble. And in that quiet, broken hospital cafeteria, a truth long buried began to claw its way back to the surface. The next morning, Nathan Cross sat at his office desk, unable to focus on anything but the words echoing in his head. She's yours. He had faced billion-dollar negotiations, corporate takeovers, and boardroom betrayals without flinching. Yet one conversation in a hospital cafeteria had shaken him in ways he could not describe. For the first time in years, business no longer mattered. What mattered was the truth. He assembled a small team that afternoon, his most trusted cybersecurity specialist, an investigator who had once worked in federal intelligence, and a forensic data expert who owed him more than one favor. He didn't tell them the full story, only that he wanted everything they could find on Rebecca Holt, the woman who had once been his investor and apparently his saboteur. Within 48 hours, his office conference room was transformed into a war room. Screens flickered with old emails, encrypted archives, and digital reconstructions of data from 8 years prior. The more they uncovered, the darker the picture became. Rebecca Holt had orchestrated a deception so sophisticated it could have fooled anyone. Using her position as a lead investor in his early company, she had gained access to private files, internal communication, and voice recordings. With the help of early manipulation technology that only a handful of companies possessed at the time, she created false narratives, fabricated photographs, synthetic audio clips, even financial statements that made it look like Nathan had misused company funds and cheated on Eva with multiple women. What she didn't anticipate was the technology that existed now. Advanced tools that could expose her lies. The forensic team detected inconsistencies across every piece of evidence that Eva had been shown. Light reflections that didn't match the environment in the photos. Audio frequencies that proved the recordings were artificially generated. Transaction records that led to non-existent accounts. By the end of the week, the truth was undeniable. The so-called proof of Nathan's betrayal had been engineered with malicious precision. When Nathan looked at the compiled evidence, he felt a mix of rage and relief so intense that it made his head spin. He called Eva immediately. "Meet me," he said. "Please, there's something you need to see." They met at his office after hours, long after the rest of the staff had gone home. Eva hesitated at the entrance, surrounded by marble floors and panoramic city lights. This world of glass and power was so far removed from the life she'd built since leaving him. Inside the conference room, Nathan gestured toward the screens. "Everything you believed came from her?" he said. "Rebecca Holt." "Look." Eva's eyes flicked between the digital files as Nathan explained what each one showed. The altered photographs, the falsified transactions, the voice synthesis analysis that proved the recordings were artificial. "This," he said quietly, "wasn't my voice, it never was." Eva's hand covered her mouth as the reality settled in. "My God," she whispered. "She did all of this because she wanted me," Nathan finished. His tone was calm, but beneath it burned a fury so cold it could freeze stone. "She couldn't stand that I loved someone else. And when I chose you over her, she decided if she couldn't have me, no one could." Eva sank into a chair, her whole body trembling. "She destroyed our lives. She took everything from us." Nathan sat beside her. "Not everything," he said softly. "I found you. I found her. And now that I know what she did, I won't let her hurt us again." For a moment, neither of them spoke. The hum of the city outside filled the silence. Then Eva looked up, her eyes shimmering with tears. "What happens now?" "Now," Nathan said, standing, "I make this right." Over the following week, Nathan's legal and investigative teams began quietly collecting evidence for a full-scale case against Rebecca Holt. Every falsified document, every manipulated file, every trace of unauthorized access to his company's servers. He wanted her exposed not only for what she had done to him, but for what she had done to Eva and Lena. But before any of that could happen, there was something far more important to him. He needed to be a father. The thought both terrified and humbled him. How did one begin to build a bond with a child who had spent her entire life without them? How did he bridge years of absence that could never be replaced? He started with the only thing he had ever been good at, showing up. The next Saturday, he met Eva and Lena in the park at her daughter's request. The sunlight filtered through tall trees, the air alive with children's laughter. When Eva and Lena arrived, he stood from the bench where he had been waiting. For a moment, he just looked at them. The woman he had once dreamed of marrying, and the child who looked like a perfect blend of them both. Lena's hand was wrapped tightly around her mother's. When she saw him, she hesitated, studying him with quiet curiosity. "Sweetheart," Eva said softly, kneeling beside her daughter, "this is the man who was watching you at the talent show." "Remember, the one who cried?" Lena asked, eyes wide. Nathan nodded, kneeling so he was at her level. "That's right," he said with a smile that trembled at the edges. "And do you know why I cried?" Lena shook her head. "Because you sang the most beautiful song I've ever heard," he said, "and because it reminded me of someone I once loved very much." Eva's gaze softened, her defenses lowering slightly. Lena tilted her head, thinking, "Mommy said that song was written by someone she used to know." "It was," Nathan replied. She wrote it with me. Lena blinked, her small brow furrowing as she processed this. Then, in a quiet voice, she asked, "Are you my dad?" Eva froze, but Nathan didn't hesitate. "Yes," he said simply. "I am." The child stared at him, her expression unreadable for a moment. Then she said with a child's perfect honesty, "You missed a lot of birthdays." The word struck him like an arrow, but Nathan smiled through the ache. "You're right, I did, and I can't ever get those back. But if you'll let me, I'll be here for all the ones that come next." Lena studied him a moment longer, then looked at her mother. Eva's nod was small but encouraging. Slowly, Lena reached out and placed her tiny hand in his. It was the smallest gesture in the world, but to Nathan, it felt like redemption. For the first time in years, Nathan felt something like peace. That afternoon, the three of them walked through the park together, talking about simple things. School, favorite songs, the stray cat that followed Lena home one day. But the peace would not last long. From across the city, someone else had learned of their reunion. Rebecca Holt, the woman who had set their tragedy in motion 8 years ago, had not disappeared. She had risen higher, wealthier, and colder. And when she saw Nathan's name linked once again with Eva's on a charity event guest list, something inside her reignited. A plan began to form, one that would threaten to destroy everything Nathan had just rebuilt. The sun was setting over the skyline when Rebecca Holt leaned back in her office chair, sipping a glass of red wine as she scrolled through the latest business headlines. Her reflection glimmered faintly on the glass wall behind her, polished, poised, and powerful. 8 years had elevated her from investor to executive, from a name in the margins to a woman whose influence rippled across industries. She had everything: power, prestige, and the admiration of those who once doubted her. Everything, except the one man she had never been able to possess. When a news article appeared on her tablet about a charitable donation made in the name of the Moore Foundation, she froze. The photo attached showed Nathan Cross at a children's hospital event, standing beside Eva Moore and a young girl with blue eyes and a smile that could only belong to him. Rebecca's lips curled into something between amusement and venom. "So, she's still alive," she murmured. "And now she's back in his world." Her manicured finger traced Nathan's face on the screen. "You always did like fixing broken things, didn't you?" she whispered. "Let's see how long that lasts." She called her assistant. "Get me a meeting with Nathan Cross. Tell him it's urgent. A potential partnership between our companies. He'll come." 2 days later, Nathan arrived at the Skyline Lounge, a restaurant perched atop the tallest building in the city. Its glass walls glowed like liquid fire under the setting sun. He was surprised by the sudden meeting request, but curiosity and business instinct had drawn him here. Rebecca greeted him with a smile too smooth to be genuine. She looked almost unchanged, perhaps even sharper with age, every line of her face honed to perfection. Her crimson suit matched her lipstick, both carefully chosen to project confidence and control. "Nathan," she said warmly, offering her hand. "It's been too long. 8 years," he replied, his voice cool. "You said you wanted to discuss a partnership?" "Always straight to business," she said, feigning disappointment. "I do miss your old charm." He gave a tight smile. "That charm ended around the time you destroyed my life." Her smile froze for half a second before returning, thinner. "I see you've been revisiting the past." "You mean uncovering it," Nathan said. "You forged documents, manipulated audio, showed her lies. You ruined 2 lives and kept a child from her father. Why?" Rebecca's eyes glittered. "Because you chose her. Because I loved her," he corrected sharply. Rebecca leaned back, swirling her wine. "You always had a weakness for lost causes. The fragile musician who needed saving. The sentimental story of rich man meets poor dreamer. But tell me, Nathan, when the novelty fades, what's left?" He stood up. "I didn't come here for philosophy." "Oh, you came here for much more than that," she said softly, sliding a sleek tablet across the table. On its screen was a paused video, a clip of Nathan and Eva walking together through a park, holding Lena's hand between them. His pulse spiked. "Where did you get this?" Rebecca smiled. "I have friends in the right places. You should be more careful, Nathan. People are watching. The press loves a scandal. especially one involving a billionaire, a charity case, and a secret child. Nathan's fists tightened at his sides. "Are you threatening me?" "I'm offering you a deal," she said smoothly. "Walk away from them, permanently. Continue building your empire in peace. Or keep playing family man and watch everything you've built burn down under the weight of public opinion." Nathan's voice dropped to a dangerous calm. "You really haven't changed, and you really haven't learned," she replied. "I can destroy you again. It's what I'm good at." He leaned closer, his voice cold enough to make her flinch. "You destroyed everything once, Rebecca, but this time I'm not letting you." He turned and walked away, leaving her sitting there with her perfect smile cracking around the edges. For the first time in years, Rebecca felt something she despised: uncertainty. That night, Nathan returned home and found Eva sitting on the living room couch, a stack of medical papers beside her. She looked up when he entered, immediately sensing something was wrong. "What happened?" she asked quietly. He hesitated before speaking. "She's back," Eva's breath caught. "Rebecca," he nodded. "She wants me to walk away from you and Lena, or she'll go to the media. She has photos, video, enough to stir a scandal." Eva went pale. "Nathan, if this affects your company," he knelt in front of her. "I don't care about the company. I care about you, about her." He gestured toward Lena's bedroom door. "She's the only thing that matters now." Eva's eyes shimmered, torn between fear and love. "I don't want to be the reason you lose everything. You're the reason I have anything," he said. For a long time they just sat there in silence, the soft hum of the city drifting through the windows. Outside, the night seemed calm, but both knew it was the calm that came before a storm. Over the following days, Rebecca's threat materialized in full force. Anonymous tips began circulating to business journals and gossip outlets. Stories appeared online, questioning Nathan's secret family, his financial impropriety, his hidden double life. Fake photos resurfaced, paired with sensational headlines designed to destroy reputations overnight. Board members called emergency meetings. Investors demanded explanations. Social media erupted with speculation. But this time, Nathan refused to play the victim. He gathered his legal team and his public relations experts, the best in the business. Together, they orchestrated a counterattack. He released verified evidence of Rebecca's earlier manipulations, backed by forensic experts and timestamp files. The same technology she had used to deceive was now being used to expose her. In one press conference, he spoke plainly. 8 years ago, I was betrayed by someone who wanted to control me. Today, I'm standing with the family that person tried to take from me. The truth isn't for sale." The story shifted almost instantly. Sympathy replaced suspicion. Within a week, Rebecca's company launched an internal investigation after documents surfaced linking her to illegal surveillance and fraud. Her reputation, carefully constructed over the years, began to unravel. Meanwhile, at home, Eva's health was improving. The new treatment plan Nathan had arranged through private specialists was working. Her energy began to return, her color slowly reviving. Lena spent her evenings sitting by her mother's side, sketching, singing softly, and insisting that everything would be okay because Daddy's fixing it. Sometimes, Nathan would watch them from the doorway, his heart heavy with gratitude and guilt. He had power, money, and influence, but none of it mattered compared to the quiet miracle of the two people who made his life whole again. Still, part of him knew that until Rebecca was fully exposed, their peace was temporary. And when the first federal investigator knocked on his office door, asking for a statement about Rebecca Holt's criminal activities, Nathan realized the reckoning had truly begun. The morning light filtered through the tall windows of Nathan's office, washing over stacks of legal documents and files that now covered his once minimalist desk. His company's logo shimmered faintly on the glass wall behind him, a reminder of everything he had built and everything now threatened by one woman's obsession. But this time, he wasn't standing alone. Across the city, the district attorney's office had opened an official case against Rebecca Holt. The evidence Nathan's team provided, including digital forensics, emails, and confidential witness statements, had been enough to trigger a formal investigation. Within days, subpoenas were issued. Rebecca's once loyal associates began to scatter, unwilling to go down with her. The same headlines that once sang her praises now tore her apart. Corporate queen under fire for fraud. Insider confirms years of digital manipulation. Rebecca Holt faces criminal probe. Nathan watched from the sidelines as the empire that had nearly destroyed him began to crumble. But while the outside world focused on scandal, his world at home revolved around something much smaller, the fragile balance of a family trying to rebuild itself. Eva sat by the window of their apartment, sunlight warming her face as she watched Lena chase the family's golden retriever across the lawn. The child's laughter filled the air, clear, bright, and alive. It was a sound Eva hadn't heard in too long. When Nathan entered, she turned with a faint smile. "You look exhausted. Lawyers," he said simply, loosening his tie. "They talk in circles," she chuckled softly. "You used to like circles. You built an empire out of them," he smirked faintly. "Only because I didn't know better." He joined her by the window, his gaze drifting toward Lena. "She looks happy." "She is," Eva said quietly. "She feels safe now." Nathan's expression softened. "That's all I ever wanted for her. For both of you." Eva hesitated, then asked the question that had lingered unspoken between them for weeks. "What happens when this is over, Nathan?" "When she's gone. When the trial ends, the noise fades." He looked at her. "Then we stop surviving and start living." She smiled, but the sadness behind her eyes didn't fade. "You make it sound simple. It's not," he admitted. "But I'm willing to spend the rest of my life trying to make it right." Across town, the walls were closing in on Rebecca Holt. Her once bustling office now felt like a tomb. Her staff avoided eye contact, and the board members who had once sought her approval now whispered in closed-door meetings. Her phone buzzed with messages from attorneys, journalists, and creditors, each one more desperate than the last. Sitting behind her mahogany desk, she stared at a printed copy of the criminal complaint. Charges: fraud, conspiracy, corporate espionage, identity manipulation, harassment. It felt surreal. She had played the game perfectly for years, manipulating, climbing, winning. Yet one man's persistence had dismantled her illusion brick by brick. She slammed the papers down and stood pacing across the room. The city stretched below her, the same skyline she once ruled from the shadows. Now it looked indifferent. Her reflection stared back at her from the window, polished but hollow. "You took everything from me," she whispered, her voice shaking with fury. "You think this ends here, Nathan?" Her phone rang. It was her lawyer. "Rebecca," he said curtly, "we've reached the point where denial isn't helping. The evidence against you is overwhelming. I suggest we negotiate a plea deal." "I don't make deals," she hissed. "I win." "Not this time," he said before hanging up. For the first time in her life, Rebecca Holt had no leverage. While her empire fell apart, Nathan's world grew smaller, quieter, and strangely more human. He spent his mornings at Eva's medical appointments, his afternoons at work, and his evenings at home, reading bedtime stories to a child who never tired of hearing him say "once upon a time." One night, as he tucked Lena in, she looked up at him and asked, "Daddy, are you famous?" He smiled. "A little. Are we famous too?" He hesitated. "Maybe someday, but I'd rather we just be happy." "Mommy says you're a hero," she whispered sleepily. Nathan chuckled. "Mommy gives me too much credit." Lena's eyelids fluttered as she drifted off. "Heroes always say that." He sat there for a long time after she fell asleep, his hand resting gently on hers, realizing that no boardroom triumph could ever compare to this quiet victory. A month later, the day of Rebecca's arraignment arrived. The courtroom was packed. Journalists, lawyers, and spectators filling every bench. Nathan sat quietly near the back beside Eva, his presence unnoticed by most. Rebecca entered in a tailored gray suit, still trying to project power, but the tremor in her hands betrayed her. The prosecutor laid out the case in brutal clarity. Falsified digital evidence, identity theft, corporate espionage, emotional coercion, and deliberate interference in private lives. Screens displayed side-by-side comparisons of her fabrications, audio frequencies, photo metadata, bank logs. At one point, Rebecca looked toward the gallery, and her eyes met Nathan's. For a fleeting second the mask cracked. Her lips parted as though she might speak, but no words came. When the judge read the charges, her composure finally collapsed. She closed her eyes, exhaled, and whispered the word that sealed her fate. Guilty. A murmur rippled through the courtroom. Eva reached over and took Nathan's hand. For both of them, the single word felt like the end of an era and the beginning of something fragile but new. Rebecca Holt was sentenced to 5 years in federal prison, with no possibility of early release. The judge ordered restitution to be paid to those she had harmed, an amount so large that it would consume everything she owned. By the time the trial ended, her name was synonymous with deceit. Her company disowned her. Her former colleagues refused to speak her name, and Nathan Cross, the man she had tried to destroy twice, walked out of that courthouse hand in hand with the two people she had once used as weapons. The world outside was bathed in golden afternoon light. Eva looked at him, the wind brushing her short hair across her face. "It's over," she said softly. He squeezed her hand. "No," he replied. "It's just beginning." That evening they celebrated quietly at home. No champagne, no speeches. Just a dinner of Eva's favorite pasta and Lena's laughter filling the house. For the first time in 8 years, Nathan slept soundly. No guilt, no ghosts, only peace. But peace he knew wasn't permanent. Healing would take time. Eva still woke some nights from dreams she couldn't remember, and he still carried the weight of lost years. Yet in each other, they had found something stronger than forgiveness, understanding. The next morning, as dawn broke over the city, Nathan made a silent vow. The life they had rebuilt would not crumble again, because this time, he wouldn't let go. The months that followed were slow, gentle, and almost unreal in their quietness. For the first time in nearly a decade, there were no lawyers, no paparazzi, no deadlines pressing in from every direction. Life moved at a human pace again. Nathan found that the silence, once unbearable, had become a kind of music. Every morning began with the same small ritual. Eva making coffee by the kitchen window, sunlight falling softly across her face, while Lena sat at the table drawing in colored pencils. Sometimes she sang to herself, humming fragments of the song that had brought them together. Those moments, so ordinary and brief, became the most sacred part of Nathan's day. Eva's health continued to improve. The new treatments, coupled with rest and care, began to restore the light in her eyes. The gray shadows of exhaustion faded. Color returned to her cheeks. The doctors called it a remarkable response. Nathan called it a miracle. Still, she remained cautious, both with her health and her heart. The past had left its marks, and trust, once broken, didn't return easily. But Nathan never rushed her. He simply stayed, patient, constant, quietly present in every way that mattered. Sometimes he still caught her watching him when she thought he wasn't looking, a long, searching gaze that seemed to ask if he was real this time. He always met that gaze with the same quiet smile. Lena was thriving in ways neither of them had expected. After her performance at the talent show went viral, a result of someone uploading a clip that spread across social media, invitations began pouring in. Music schools, charities, and even local television wanted her to perform. The world had fallen in love with the little girl who sang to save her mother. But Eva was protective. "She's just a child," she told Nathan one night. "I don't want her to lose that. I don't want her to be swallowed by the same world that hurt us." "She won't," Nathan promised. "Not while we're here." Instead of pushing fame, he turned their living room into a small recording studio. He called in a few of his company's sound engineers, and together they built a space where Lena could sing freely, safely. The first time she stood in front of the microphone, her voice trembled. "What should I sing?" she asked. "Something that's yours," Eva said softly. Lena smiled, thought for a moment, and began to hum a melody of her own. It was simple, a few soft notes that grew into something delicate and pure. Nathan watched in silence, realizing that this was what legacy truly looked like. Not wealth, not empire, but love echoing through the next generation. One evening, after Lena had gone to bed, Eva sat on the porch wrapped in a shawl looking out at the stars. Nathan joined her, bringing 2 cups of tea. She took hers without a word, sipping slowly before speaking. Do you ever think about what might have happened if none of it had gone wrong? All the time, he said, and he smiled faintly. Then I remember that if it hadn't gone wrong, I might never have learned how much right really matters. She looked at him, then at the dark stretch of sky. You still talk like a philosopher? I had a good teacher, he said, eyes glinting. For a moment neither spoke. The only sound was the hum of the city in the distance, soft and far away. A reminder that the world still moved, but they didn't have to chase it anymore. Eva turned toward him. Nathan, she said quietly, why didn't you ever get married after I left? He took a long breath before answering. Because I already had a family, even if I didn't know it. Her eyes softened. That's a very lonely kind of love. He reached over, covering her hand with his. It was, until now. As the seasons changed, the house began to fill with laughter, light and small human messes. Drawings taped to the fridge, a forgotten sock under the couch, dishes left unwashed because someone decided to dance instead. Nathan learned to live in that mess. He learned how to braid Lena's hair badly, how to burn pancakes spectacularly, and how to listen instead of lecture. There were still hard days, doctor visits, business stresses, the ghosts of what they'd endured, but those no longer defined them. One morning he drove Lena to school. As she climbed out of the car, she turned back and said, Hey, Daddy. Yeah, are you coming to Family Day next week? Wouldn't miss it, she grinned. You better not. I'm showing everyone my song, he laughed. I'll be in the front row. When she ran toward her friends, backpack bouncing, he sat for a moment in the car, realizing how extraordinary it was to be asked to show up for something so simple. After all the years of power and loneliness, that a child wanting him there was the truest form of success he'd ever known. That evening, Eva found him sitting by the piano in the living room, staring at the sheet music from the song they had written together years ago, Eternal Hearts. She leaned on the doorframe. You still keep that old thing around? He smiled. It's where everything started. She crossed the room and sat beside him on the bench. Then maybe it's where something new should begin. He turned to her. Eva, before he could finish, she kissed him, soft, steady, and real. It wasn't a grand cinematic kiss. It was quieter than that, the kind that belonged to people who had already lived through every storm and finally found the shore. When she pulled back, she whispered, Let's stop trying to fix the past. Let's just build what's left. And for the first time since the night she had disappeared 8 years ago, Nathan Cross stopped running. From the world, from guilt, from himself. He simply nodded and said, Together. Over the next few months, the house became a haven for something larger than healing, creation. Eva began teaching music again, this time to children who couldn't afford lessons. Nathan funded the classes anonymously, refusing any recognition. Lena recorded her first song, not for fame but as a gift, a simple lullaby she wrote for her mother. It went viral again, but this time no one cared about the backstory. They cared about the sound, honest, innocent, alive. In interviews, when people asked her what the song meant, Lena would just smile and say, It's about hope, and in truth it was. Because in a world that had tried to break them, they had built something unbreakable. Spring came early that year. The city trees bloomed in soft shades of white and pink, their petals swirling through the air like shy confetti. For the first time in years, the world outside seemed to mirror what Nathan felt inside. Renewal. Their home, once quiet and heavy with unspoken fears, now pulsed with music. Lena's laughter drifted through the halls, chased by the rhythm of piano notes and her mother's warm voice. Sometimes, Nathan would come home from work and pause at the doorway just to listen, not wanting to interrupt the world they were building note by note. Eva's health had stabilized. The doctors used words like remission now, and though she still moved carefully, her strength was returning. She began teaching again full-time, opening a small studio in the community center near their neighborhood. Children flocked to her classes, drawn not just by her musical skill, but by the gentleness she carried. Her students called her Miss Eva with the sunshine eyes. Nathan funded most of it quietly, but he let her believe it was all through donations and small grants. He didn't want credit. It was her dream. He was just the foundation beneath it. Meanwhile, Lena's quiet stardom continued to grow. After her viral song, music schools began calling, offering scholarships and invitations to perform at charity events. Her voice, fragile yet powerful, had become something of a symbol, innocence that had survived chaos. But Nathan and Eva were careful. They chose performances that mattered. Hospitals, children's shelters, recovery centers, places where music could heal, not sell. At one such event, Lena sang for a room of cancer patients, many the same age her mother had been when she first got sick. Her voice filled the sterile room like light through a cracked door. Some wept quietly. Others simply smiled, their eyes closed. Nathan stood at the back, hands in his pockets, heart swelling in a way no business award had ever made him feel. When she finished, a nurse leaned toward him and whispered, "You must be so proud." He looked at his daughter, her little bow, her shy grin, and said softly, "More than words can say, but not everything was peace." With their growing public recognition came new attention. A major entertainment company reached out, offering Lena a record deal, worldwide promotion, full production support, brand partnerships. It was everything most parents would dream of for their child. Nathan brought the proposal home one evening, setting the glossy folder on the table. Eva's reaction was immediate. "Absolutely not," she said. "She's 10, Nathan. She's a child, not a product, I know," he said gently. "But it's an opportunity, one that could secure her future and yours." Eva crossed her arms, her tone sharper now. "You think I care about money? About deals? That's what destroyed us before. Chasing what looked like success," he sighed. "This is different. I'd make sure she's protected. No contracts she doesn't understand, no pressure she can't handle. She deserves a childhood," Eva said, "not another stage." The silence that followed was tense, filled with unspoken fears. Nathan wasn't wrong. He just couldn't see that Eva wasn't afraid of failure, but of losing what little peace they'd found. Finally, she whispered, "You always see the world as something to fix, Nathan. But not everything broken needs rebuilding. Some things just need to be left alone." Her words struck him deeply. He nodded slowly, closing the folder. "You're right. We'll wait." Eva looked at him, surprised, relieved, and something softened in her eyes again. She reached across the table and touched his hand. "Thank you." "For what?" "For listening." The next few weeks were calm again. Nathan poured his energy into his company, which was thriving under a new, quieter leadership style. He had stepped back from the spotlight, choosing to mentor younger executives rather than dominate headlines. Eva's studio expanded. She added art and poetry classes, turning it into a sanctuary for children from difficult homes. It became more than a school. It became a refuge, a place where small voices learned to grow loud. Sometimes Nathan would visit and watch from the back as she taught. The way she guided the children, her voice patient, her smile unwavering, it reminded him of why he fell in love with her in the first place. Then came a letter. It arrived one rainy afternoon, sealed in a plain white envelope addressed to Nathan personally. The handwriting was sharp and familiar, almost hauntingly so. Inside was a single page. "Nathan, they say time heals all wounds. It doesn't. Some people just learn to hide the scars. I've been granted early parole for cooperation with federal investigators. I'm leaving the city. But before I do, I thought you should know that I still remember everything. You won your peace. Keep it. You won't hear from me again. R.H. Rebecca Holt." Nathan sat for a long time, staring at the letter. There was no threat in it, no plea, just emptiness. He could have thrown it away, but instead, he locked it in a drawer, not as a reminder of fear, but of closure. Later that evening, Eva found him by the window, the rain streaking down the glass like soft tears. "Something wrong?" she asked. He shook his head slowly. "No, something finally right." She didn't ask what he meant. She just leaned into him, her head resting on his shoulder. And together, they watched the rain fall, the storm outside nothing compared to the calm they had finally found within. Months later, on a warm summer evening, Eva held a small recital at her studio. Parents filled the folding chairs. Cameras flashing as children sang and played instruments nervously. Lena was the last to perform. Before she began, she looked at her mother and father in the crowd and smiled. "This song," she said into the microphone, "is about finding light after losing it. Then she began to sing, a new song, one she had written herself. Her voice was no longer that of a frightened little girl. It was strong, confident, glowing with emotion and history far beyond her years. The audience listened in silence, moved not just by her voice but by the quiet power behind it. The story of everything her family had survived. When she finished, the applause was thunderous, but the only thing she cared about was the way her parents were standing, hand in hand, smiling up at her through tears. In that single moment, the circle was complete. That night, as they walked home under the soft glow of streetlights, Lena slipped her small hand into both of theirs and said, "We're like one song now. All three parts." Eva smiled. "What kind of song?" "The kind that never ends," Lena said. Nathan laughed softly. "Then we better keep singing." And beneath the stars they did. Three voices, one harmony, rising above everything the world had tried to take from them. The years that followed were kind in ways that life rarely is. The chaos of the past slowly melted into memory, replaced by something far subtler, the quiet rhythm of ordinary days. Nathan Cross had once believed that peace meant stillness. Now he understood that true peace was movement without struggle, the ability to keep living without fighting the world or himself. He still led his company, though not as before. The endless boardroom battles and late-night deals had given way to mentorship, philanthropy, and innovation meant for people, not profit. He had built his empire, but now he wanted it to mean something. Eva often teased him about it. "You're turning into a philosopher in a business suit," she'd say, and he would smile because, in some ways, she was right. Their home had become a small universe, filled with music, laughter, and the kind of imperfections that made everything feel alive. Lena grew quickly as children do. At 12, her voice had deepened slightly, her tone richer, her confidence blooming. She spent hours writing songs in her notebook, words scribbled in pencil, tiny hearts drawn beside unfinished lyric. Nathan sometimes found her sitting at the piano late at night, her small fingers dancing over the keys. "Can't sleep?" he'd ask softly. "Too many sounds in my head," she'd whisper. He'd smile. That's how music begins. One night she looked up at him and asked, "Dad, when do people stop being afraid?" He thought for a moment before answering. "They don't. They just get better at singing through it." She nodded slowly, as if tucking the answer away for later. Eva's recovery had stabilized completely by then. Her doctors called her case extraordinary. She called it grace. She had grown into a woman who no longer carried her pain like armor. The fear that once lived in her eyes was replaced with light. She had even begun writing music again, songs not about sorrow, but about rebirth. One of those songs, "The Sound of Tomorrow," became the anthem for her students' annual showcase. It spread through local communities like wildfire, sung in schools and therapy centers. Music that once came from heartbreak was now healing others. Every time Nathan watched her perform it, he realized how powerful survival could be when it turned into art. But even peace, when it lasts long enough, begins to test a person in subtler ways. Nathan's company had become one of the largest in the industry. New investors wanted expansion, more cities, more influence, global reach. His advisors urged him to return to the public eye to reclaim his visionary image. For months he resisted, but old habits are hard to kill. The thrill of building, of being seen, still lingered deep in his bones. One night, while reviewing an acquisition proposal, Eva found him in his study, surrounded by glowing screens. "I thought you said you were done chasing numbers," she said softly. He rubbed his temples. "This isn't chasing, it's strategy. We can expand the foundation, fund new projects, reach more people." She interrupted gently. "You mean control more people?" He looked at her, tired and defensive. "It's not like that anymore." She walked closer, her voice calm but firm. "It always starts that way, Nathan, until the numbers start to matter more than the names." Her words landed like a whisper of truth he didn't want to hear. He closed the laptop. "You think I'm changing?" "I think you're remembering who you used to be," she said quietly, "and forgetting who you became." Her gaze softened. "You fought too hard to find peace, Nathan. Don't trade it for applause." He sat there in silence for a moment, then nodded slowly. "You're right." When she turned to leave, he reached for her hand. "Thank you for stopping me. That's what love does. she said with a small smile. It reminds you when to stop running. Weeks later, Nathan made a decision that shocked his board. He announced that he was stepping down as CEO, naming his protege as successor. The press called it a bold retreat. Some said he was walking away from power. Others said he was wiser than ever. For Nathan, it wasn't retreat. It was arrival. He dedicated his time fully to the Crossmore Foundation, a global initiative for children's music and education therapy. The name had been Eva's idea, combining their legacies not as brands but as people. The foundation funded programs in hospitals, schools, and refugee centers, anywhere a song could reach. Lena often joined the sessions, performing for children whose eyes lit up the way hers once had. The family traveled together often, not for business but for purpose. They visited rural towns where classrooms had no instruments, cities where hospitals couldn't afford therapy programs, and small villages where music was the only language everyone understood. Nathan often found himself humbled by the simplicity of it all, the way a single melody could bring joy where wealth never could. One evening during a foundation event in Paris, Lena performed Eternal Hearts for the first time in public with her mother. It was the same song that had once torn them apart, now reborn as the song that united them. Nathan stood in the audience, watching as Eva played the piano and Lena sang. Their voices blended, one mature, one still discovering, into something that transcended both. The crowd rose in a standing ovation before the last note even faded. But for Nathan, applause was just background noise. What mattered was the way Eva looked up at him from the stage, that quiet, knowing smile that said, "We made it." And in that moment, he realized something profound. Redemption doesn't come all at once. It comes in fragments, in every choice to stay, every truth told, every fear faced. Later that night, they walked along the same city lights reflecting off the water like spilled stars. Lena skipped ahead, humming softly, leaving her parents a few steps behind. Eva leaned her head on Nathan's shoulder. "Do you ever miss it, the old life?" "The noise," he asked. "Sometimes, but then I look at this." He gestured toward Lena, twirling beneath the glow of the bridge lights. "And I remember why I left." Eva smiled. "You didn't leave, Nathan. You finally came home." He looked at her, really looked, and realized she was right. For years he had chased success thinking it would make him whole. But peace wasn't a place he had to reach. It was the people he'd chosen to stay beside. And as they stood there, three silhouettes against the golden river, Nathan finally felt the thing he'd searched for all his life. Not victory, not forgiveness, but quiet belonging. Time, like music, doesn't stop. It changes key. Years pass quietly, gently reshaping their lives. Seasons folded into one another, until the chaos that once defined them became nothing but distant echoes in the halls of memory. Lena grew into a young woman with her mother's warmth and her father's quiet intensity. Her voice, once soft and uncertain, matured into something deep and resonant. She wrote songs that carried the world in them, hope, loss, faith, and everything in between. At 17, she released her first album, not through a label, but through the foundation her parents had built. The proceeds went entirely to music therapy programs for children. When asked in interviews why she'd done it that way, she smiled and said, "Because music healed me. Now it's my turn to pass it on." Nathan watched from behind the cameras, proud but humbled. He had built companies that changed industries. But this, watching his daughter change hearts, felt like the truest legacy he could ever leave. Eva, now fully healthy, had become something of a legend in her own right. Her school had expanded into multiple branches, supported by donations from around the world. She refused to call it success. She called it a long echo of kindness. She still performed occasionally, not for fame, but for joy. On quiet weekends, she and Lena would sit by the piano, harmonizing for hours, while Nathan cooked in the kitchen, pretending not to listen, even though every note melted into it. Their home was alive with small rituals. Sunday breakfast, late-night tea, birthday letters left under pillows, and stories told around the living room fire. They were ordinary moments, yet they felt monumental because each one was proof that they had survived. Sometimes Eva would look at Nathan across the room, reading, laughing, living, and think of the man he used to be, The man who had once been all sharp edges and sleepless ambition. Now he carried gentleness like a second skin. "You finally learned how to breathe," she told him one night as they sat on the porch watching the stars. He smiled faintly. "You taught me." One autumn evening, Lena returned home from a world tour, her first. The house, though large, seemed to shrink with her laughter filling it again. Eva hugged her tightly. "You've grown taller." Lena grinned. "You've grown wiser." Nathan stood nearby, watching, remembering the little girl who once sang for her sick mother under stage lights. Now that same girl had stood before thousands, her music touching lives across oceans. That night, after dinner, they sat around the old piano, the same one where Eternal Hearts had first been written. Lena placed her hands on the keys and said softly, "Let's play it one last time." All three of us. Eva hesitated. "Are you sure?" Lena nodded. "It's where everything began." Nathan sat between them. Eva began the melody, gentle and steady. Lena joined, her voice rich with years of growth and memory. Nathan didn't sing, he never could, but his presence filled the space like harmony itself. When the song ended, there was no applause, only silence, the kind that follows something sacred. Eva wiped her eyes. "You've turned our story into music." Lena smiled through tears. It already was music. Time kept moving, as it always does. Nathan turned 60 quietly, surrounded by laughter and candlelight. There were no grand speeches, only a single toast from Eva. "To the man who taught us that love isn't about fixing broken things," she said softly. "It's about building something stronger in their place." He laughed, embarrassed, and raised his glass. "To the two people who taught me what life really means." When he looked at them, his wife and daughter, he felt no need for anything else. In the years that followed, Lena became the Foundation's ambassador, traveling across the world to share the story of how music had healed her family. She never mentioned names or scandals, never spoke of pain. She simply told people that once, a song had saved her, and that every person had one waiting inside them. The Foundation grew beyond their wildest dreams. Schools were built in small towns and hospitals in distant cities. Music therapy became part of medical programs around the world. One of the first facilities was named the Eva Cross Center for Healing Arts. When Eva saw the plaque, she turned to Nathan with tears in her eyes. "I told you I didn't need to be remembered," she whispered. He smiled. "This isn't remembrance, it's gratitude." As for Nathan, he aged quietly. His hair turned silver, his pace slower, but his mind was still sharp. Sometimes he'd sit in the garden at sunrise, hands wrapped around a cup of coffee, watching the world wake. Eva often joined him, resting her head on his shoulder, saying little. Words weren't needed anymore. After all they'd lived through, silence had become their favorite language. One morning, he said softly, "Do you ever think about how unlikely this all was? You, me, her. Everything that went wrong, and somehow we still ended up here." Eva smiled. "That's how you know it was meant to be. The things that almost didn't happen are the ones that matter most." He nodded slowly, eyes on the horizon. "Then I guess we were meant to last." "You guess?" she teased gently. He laughed. "No, I know." That night, Lena found them asleep on the porch, his arm around her shoulders, her head resting against his chest. The air was cool, the sky clear, the stars infinite. She smiled quietly, covering them both with a blanket, whispering, "Eternal Hearts." And for a long while, she just stood there listening to the soft rhythm of their breathing, a melody older than any song she had ever written. It was peace in its purest form. The years stretched forward like pages of a well-loved book, their edges worn, their meaning deepened by time. Life in the Cross household had slowed to a graceful rhythm. Soft mornings, long walks, laughter over breakfast. The world outside continued to spin with its usual hunger for speed and success. But inside those walls, time had learned to breathe. Nathan had always believed his legacy would be measured in numbers, buildings, or achievements. But as he grew older, he realized that true legacy lived in quieter things. In songs sung by children he'd never meet, in kindness passed from teacher to student, in the love that had outlasted its own destruction. He no longer feared ending. He had come to see them as music's natural pause, the breath between verses that gives meaning to the melody. On a late summer evening, the family gathered once again at the Foundation's annual gala, a celebration of music, healing, and hope. The event had grown into a global tradition, but to them, it still felt intimate, like a reunion of souls who had survived the same storm. Eva wore a soft silver dress that shimmered under the light. Nathan couldn't stop staring at her. Even after all the years, she still carried that same quiet radiance that had first drawn him in. Lena, now 23, stood at the center of the stage as the hall fell silent. She had written a new song for the occasion, one she hadn't shared with anyone, not even her parents. This song, she said into the microphone, isn't just for tonight. It's for the people who taught me that love isn't something you find once. It's something you choose every day, even when it's hard, even when it hurts. Her voice trembled slightly before she began to sing. The melody was soft, woven with echoes of eternal hearts. The songlet had begun it all, but reshaped into something new, wiser, fuller, alive with the weight of everything that had come before. As she sang, images of their journey filled Nathan's mind. The little girl on the stage, the hospital hallway, Eva's trembling hands, the years of pain and rebuilding, and finally this moment, whole, complete. By the time the last note faded, there wasn't a dry eye in the hall. Eva pressed her hand over Nathan's, whispering, "She's the best of both of us." He nodded, voice breaking. "And better than we ever were." After the gala, they returned home to a quiet house, the city's lights glowing softly through the windows. Nathan poured 2 cups of tea and carried them to the porch where Eva was waiting, wrapped in a blanket, her hair touched with silver but her smile still bright as ever. "Do you remember the night we met?" she asked. He chuckled. "In that dim little bar with the bad sound system? And you told me I sang like a story you wanted to finish." "I still feel that way," he said softly. She leaned her head against his shoulder. "We did finish it, you know. Maybe not the way we planned, but beautifully all the same," he smiled. "Stories like ours don't end. They just become songs." Years later, after Nathan passed peacefully in his sleep, a quiet departure, just as he had lived his final years, Eva and Lena sat together on the same porch, the air thick with memories and the scent of blooming jasmine. Lena held an old leather journal in her hands. Inside, there were pages filled with reflections, letters, and fragments of thoughts he'd never spoken aloud. One entry read, "If I've learned anything, it's that forgiveness isn't forgetting. It's remembering without breaking. And love, real love, is when 2 people stop fighting to win and start fighting to stay." If anyone reads this, I hope they understand that peace isn't found at the top. It's found beside someone who never leaves. Eva closed the journal, tears glistening in her eyes but a faint smile on her lips. "He always knew how to turn truth into poetry," she whispered. Lena nodded. He was still writing songs, just without the music. The years continued their gentle march. Eva grew older, slower, but never bitter. She still visited the foundation once a week, still sat with children learning to find their voice, still carried that unshakable warmth that could turn even silence into comfort. Lena continued the work they had all begun together, teaching, performing, and leading the foundation's next generation. Every year, on the anniversary of her father's passing, she sang Eternal Hearts at sunrise, not as a performance, but as a promise. Her voice, rising through the dawn, echoed across the hills like a prayer carried on the wind. And though the years took much from them, youth, time, certainty, one thing remained untouched, the melody they had built together. Because love, once turned into music, never really fades. It lingers, softer with time, but stronger with meaning. An unending harmony between souls that refuse to forget each other. On her final birthday, as the sun dipped below the horizon, Eva sat by the piano one last time, her hands trembling but her smile unwavering. Lena sat beside her playing softly. "You tired, Mom?" Eva shook her head. "No, just full, the kind of full that feels like peace." They played a few quiet notes together. Then Eva whispered, "Promise me one thing, anything. Keep singing, no matter what happens. Keep reminding the world that broken things can still make music." Lena pressed her mother's hand to her heart. Always. When the last light faded from the sky, the piano went still. The world outside continued, unaware, unhurried. But inside that home, a lifetime of love had finally come full circle. Years later, when visitors walked through the Crossmore Foundation, they would see 3 portraits hanging in the main hall. Eva at her piano, Nathan beside her and Lena in the middle, microphone in hand, smiling toward the future. Beneath the portraits, engraved in bronze, were 6 simple words: "Eternal hearts never stop singing." And for generations after, children would walk past those words, humming a melody they didn't yet know the meaning of, not realizing that somewhere in some quiet place, that music was still echoing through the universe.